I lost $100,000 funding earnest money for real estate investors, not potential profit, like actual cash out of my bank account. And I know what you might be thinking, oh, I thought EMD funding was supposed to be easy. Didn't that ad say so? Well, if that's you, this video will be a little dose of reality, because if you didn't know, I spent the last few years funding hundreds of earnest money deposit or EMD deals across the country for investors. And what started as what I thought was an easy side hustle quickly turned into a bit of a nightmare. So bad, in fact, that I almost had to go back to my engineering job and give up on real estate altogether. So in this video, I'm gonna get real with you guys, because those 3 mistakes that I made, they didn't just cost me my money, they almost cost me my freedom. And I'm probably gonna cringe the entire time I make this video, but if it can help you guys avoid the same mistakes that I went through, the things that I had to go through, hopefully it'll all be worth it. So let's start with the biggest mistake, because if you screw this one up like I did, you might not even be able to make it to the rest before your business crashes and burns. But before I even get there, I wanna make sure you understand how this business even works in the first place. Okay, so the business behind funding EMD is actually very simple. Let's start with my classic scenario here. We've got our house, and we've got our seller. And this seller is going to be selling their house over here to a buyer. Now, on a typical real estate transaction timeline, which I'll draw out for us right here, we've got from here to over here. And at the beginning is when you go under contract, and then the end is when you actually close on the property. And in residential real estate, that's going to be about 30 days from beginning to close. Now, at the beginning, right when you go under contract on that property, you are going to be required to put down what's called EMD, or an earnest money deposit. And let's say, for example, this property, the seller is selling for $500,000. The EMD is going to typically be about 1% of that purchase price, which would equal $5,000. The EMD is a good faith deposit. It basically holds that contract. It says like, hey, I'm committed to buying this property, so I'm going to hold this contract. But $5,000, there's a lot of reasons why a buyer may not want to or may not be able to put that money down for the property. Keep in mind, they have to put it down if they want to buy the property. But some buyers are buying a lot of properties, and 5K may not seem like a crazy amount, but what if they buy 10 properties a month, which is pretty normal? Well, now you have $50,000 sitting for how long? 30 days plus every time, right? For all of those properties. They could be a new buyer who doesn't have any money. They could be a buyer that's raising capital. It could be all these different things. Another scenario is that we could have a friend in the middle here, a wholesaler. And that wholesaler is actually getting that property under contract for, let's say, that 500K. And then they're going to sell the property to an end buyer for maybe 520,000. And they're going to make a profit on that. But in order to do that, what do they need? They got to be able to put down that EMD, right? And so both buyers and wholesalers need earnest money deposits. Now, this is the great part of setting the standard here. And the last thing I want to talk about with you guys is on this timeline, right? We said it's about 30 days. The first 10 to 14 days or so, we'll mark it right here, is going to close out what's called the inspection period, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a period with which you can inspect the property and make sure that there's nothing wrong, make sure there's no mold in the walls, you know, whatever else it might be, right? That's our inspection period. And typically the way this works, just so we can set the stage for all of the mistakes that I've made, is that before this inspection period, if your contract is set up correctly, you can get this earnest money deposit, this $5,000 back. If you go past this period and you continue on with the deal, then most of the time you can't get that money back, because that's the whole point. The point of this money is to lock you in on the transaction, right? That is why it is there. That is earnest money funding itself. The business behind this is that for those people that don't want to fund that or can't fund that, you and I can come in and fund that money for them. Sounds a lot simpler than it is, hence why I'm here talking to you guys about the mistakes that I made, but it can work. And one of the biggest reasons that can work is because, check this out. If this person was going to make $20,000 when they sold this property, but they can't do that unless they have this $5,000 EMD, then getting that $5,000 is going to unlock $20,000 in profit for them. And so if they can't do it, but you can, or I can, then that creates a great opportunity for them to make money, and I can make a lot of money for doing that, right? That is the premise and the stage for which I was funding these deals, right? Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about the process itself and the mistakes that I made, because the number one mistake I made almost ruined my entire business, which was relying on the borrowers instead of a title company. Now, I want to jump back down to the whiteboard to explain this. So mistake number one, when you're sending EMD, this money never goes to another human being. What it does is it goes to what's called a title company or an escrow agent or something like that. And this person right here, their job is to hold on to that money and keep it safe and follow the contracts that you give them in order to do so, okay? If you ever were to just send this money into the seller's bank account, let's say, you're never getting that money back. Never make that mistake. That would be a massive mistake. I didn't make that mistake at least, so don't do that. Then when the money is at title, based on the contract, let's say that you cancel the deal, title then looks at the contract and they determine should that money go back to the seller or should that money go back to the funder/buyer. And your contract is going to delineate and break down why it should go to the place that it should. And then this title company, in theory at least, they should follow that contract and say, here's what I'm doing based on what the contract says. When I was new, I was very naive to this. I was very naive to the whole process. I had seen some videos. I figured, we'll just send it and see what happens, right? I do that a lot. Anyways, so that was what I was doing, was kind of just going for it. And I made this mistake of relying on the borrowers. And if we go back and look at this timeline, I can show you exactly why that mattered, because this inspection period right here, that's what protects your earnest money. When you are funding for a wholesaler specifically, this inspection period is how you have the opportunity to get your money out before the deal goes south. And if you don't, then your money is gone, right? And what I was doing was I was speaking with this wholesaler, which, by the way, no offense to the wholesalers watching this, but people typically just wholesale when they're trying to get started in real estate. You don't do it for a profession because it's terrible and it's a hamster wheel and it never ends, right? Most wholesalers, not all, but most wholesalers are new and desperate to make money. And so when you're trying to work with one of these people to protect your money, do you think this new desperate person is worried more about protecting your money or making the money to pay their rent that month? Yeah, you probably guessed it. They don't care about you at all. And what I was doing was I was leaning on these wholesalers and saying, hey, let me know if you find a buyer. Let's make sure that we're still protected by the inspection. Is the title company on the same page? Is everybody good to go? You can probably see the mistake that I made there, right? I was leaning on this person that did not have my best in mind, whether they said they did or not, because sometimes they say they do until things go bad, of course. But at the end of the day, it's actually really, really simple. In this breakdown, who is in control of my money? Is it the borrower? No, it's the title company. The title company is the one facilitating my money. And what I was doing was I was sending my EMD to the title company, but then I was going like this. I was talking to the borrower, who was then talking to the title company, and then the title company was talking to the borrower, who was then talking to me, or oftentimes ignoring me, right? And not saying anything. And I was playing this game of telephone trying to figure all of this stuff out. Not smart. Not smart at all. That was a huge mistake that I made, was trying to communicate through that borrower. And this is the primary thing. I've got two other things that I'll show you guys, mistakes that I made, but this was the primary thing that lost me money. I was harping on these people, on the borrower. When does the inspection period end? Do you have a buyer in place? What are we going to do if this doesn't work out? And for some stupid reason, I think I was scared and maybe just a little bit unknowledgeable still, but I just didn't speak to the title company that was controlling the money. You know who isn't guessing on when the inspection period ends? The title company. You know who knows everything that's going on the transaction because it's their job? The title company. You know who's not looking for me at all? The borrower. And the worst part about it is that now all of those people, frankly, are kind of on my dead to me list because they've all stolen money from me. I'm not going to list them out on this video, but there is probably, I think, 8 or 9 people that make up all this money lost that just disappeared, said, screw you. We don't care that we lost all of your money, because honestly, those people are in a bad spot. They're desperate. They don't care about their reputation. They don't care about anything, because if they did, they probably wouldn't be running a crappy business like that in the first place, right? The other side of that is that when you get into these deals, everybody's friendly, right? Everybody that I've lost money to, when I was giving them money, they were my best friend. Oh yeah, we're going to take such good care of it. We're going to close this deal. We're going to have a great relationship. And they sold me, right? I was the dumb one. They sold me on that. And I was like, yeah, you know what? We could build this great business together. This person seems great. But what did I miss? Well, what about when things go wrong? And that's one of the other mistakes that we'll talk about. But that's mistake number 1. I relied on borrowers. I trusted them instead of trusting a title company, knowing full well that the title company is the one that's going to protect my money. And that leads me to mistake number 2, which was using the wrong contracts. How the heck am I supposed to know what's the right and wrong contracts? Well, I was new, so I didn't, but this video can help you not make that mistake, because what I did was I found these people, right? I found people that were running similar businesses that looked successful on the outside, and they were like, here's what I'm doing. And being new, being naive, I thought, okay, well, if they're doing it, then I'll just do what they're doing and it'll work the same way. And the problem with that isn't that overall logic, it's what's behind it. It's whether or not what they're doing is normal. For example, you could have somebody that has a really, really successful business that got lucky. That happens all the time, right? That's probably happened with me multiple times, but that doesn't show you the full picture. And so with these people that I was looking at, I copied what they were doing with the mistake of they had never dealt with a problem. And so my process was great when everything went well. Now, why is that? When you have contracts, what are those protecting you for? When things go perfectly? No, they are protecting you for when things go bad, right? I was using these contracts that all these other people were using, and they were like, yeah, you use these contracts, you make a bunch of money, woo, everything's perfect, the world is amazing. And then what happened? Well, then I had these borrowers default on me. I was communicating with them instead of title companies, and they went against their contracts. They had the deal fall through. They ran out of capital. They couldn't raise their money. And now all of a sudden, I have this pit in my stomach that I can clearly remember the first couple times this happened, where I was like, oh my gosh, how do I enforce these contracts? Do they actually work? And I went down that rabbit hole because, guys, when I lost this $100,000, I was not raking in money. Like, I was losing all the money I had been making, and I was now in the red, losing money I didn't even have on these deals. And so I went down the trail of like speaking to lawyers, how do I get this money back? And they looked at the contracts, and I kid you not, this is what they said. Yeah, you have nothing. These contracts will do nothing for you. Very painful, incredibly painful conversation to have when I think that, oh, I'm chilling, right? I've got all of this stuff lined up, and now all of a sudden I find out, nope, you're screwed. Everything you did was completely wrong. Thankfully, now I've learned a lot from that. Actually, if you go inside of Fund of Freedom, you can see our contracts right here. For EMD, we have the addendums, we have the agreements, we have everything that is needed for earnest money deposits to actually work. And why do I share this with you? Because as I'm going through these things, I've now figured out how to deal with deals gone bad. And I've actually had it happen. And now, and you've seen, I posted some of these on my channel, you've seen me now get to use these new contracts that I had drafted up with attorneys, where we focused on what? Not when things go good, but when things go bad, can these contracts support us and make sure that we get our money back? And now we've gotten to test it multiple times. And finally, I feel good about the fact that I can handle that. It's not just the good, I can actually handle the bad. But huge mistake using contracts that didn't protect me on the downside. It's like the placebo effect. It was like, cool, I feel like I'm okay. Oh, here's a bad situation, and I'm screwed because I focused on the wrong thing. So that was the second mistake I made. The third mistake that I've made, I talked about it before, it's focusing on more deals. Huge mistake. And it was my lack of understanding of leverage. Now, here's what I mean by that. If I fund a $5,000 EMD and I charge a 40% return, then I will profit $2,000 when that deal closes. If I fund a $50,000 EMD and I charge 40%, then I will make $20,000 when that deal closes. Now, obviously, that's a 10x multiple on my money because I funded 10 times more, but did I do more work? No, same exact amount of work. That was the leverage that I was lacking, was understanding that I can fund more money and make 10 times more and do the same amount of work. And you might be thinking, oh, but Ryan, I don't have $50,000. Neither do I. I use other people's money. When you are making these kinds of returns, other people's money is a cakewalk. It is not hard to do. In fact, I've got my free community. You guys can click the first link in the description. It is full of real estate investors. It is full of people funding deals like this. And if you don't raise that capital to fund a deal like this in the first 5 minutes, then I will fund it for you. Okay. It is very easy to get done. You can click that first link in the description to jump into the group. The mistake that I made was I was looking at deals themselves because I had joined some mentorships that had this obsession with how many deals have you done? How many deals have you done? Have you done 10 deals, 50 deals, 100 deals? They were giving out prizes based on deals. And I was like, I want to look good in their eyes. And so I just want to do as many deals as possible. And so what I was doing was I had deals coming in that were sketchy. I had deals coming in from people that didn't have experience. I had deals come in that weren't completing all the paperwork, whatever else. And I was just eating them up, taking them all in. Why? Because I had this concept in my head called potential profits, which again was being talked about all the time in my mentorship. Oh, you're projected to make $50,000. Ooh, we're projected to do this. We're projected to do that. And I was like, well, I want to be projected to do that stuff. So I'm going to bring in all these deals, and then I can have on my whiteboard my projected income, and I can stare at that every day and be like, oh, wow, I'm going to make so much money. This is amazing. So I did that. I didn't just think it. I did it. And I reached what I thought was my peak. I had a deal a day going. I had over 25 deals going in 1 month. And I was like, this is the height of income. I am a legend. And then what happened? Well, those deals take 30 days, right, to pan out or not pan out. And yeah, they didn't pan out. That was where everything started to go wrong for me, because I had all of these deals. I was losing track of things. I was communicating with the borrowers and not the title company. And all of a sudden, money started going down the drain. Deal goes bad. I don't know what to do. That's when I found out the contract didn't work. Another deal goes bad. Now I'm trying to deal with those, and I'm trying to make sure my other money's protected. Meanwhile, I've got a giant pit in my stomach the whole time because I'm like, the world is ending. I effed up big time. But you can't just get out of this in one day. Why? Because I had money all over the place with all these different people. I knew I had screwed up, but now I was like I was in there. I was deep. I can close this out by saying that's one of the biggest mistakes that you guys can make. I'm not saying you're making it, but I am saying I've spoken to a lot of people like you that do make this mistake on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly basis, which is this obsession with making some large sum of money, with looking cool, with proving to your parents or your friends or your spouse that your business is successful. And in doing so, exposing yourself in a way that can completely destroy you. I'm very, very blessed to say that while all of this stuff was going bad for me, I was able to put together enough wins and be frugal and smart enough to survive, because I was this close. I was that close to having to go back to my job and shutting all this stuff down because it was miserable. I had money out in all these places. I didn't know if any of it would ever come back. I ended up losing over $100,000 in total on these deals with people, all because I listened to the wrong people and I only looked at the good side. So if you're watching this video, that's my encouragement to you. Don't look at what can happen when things go well. Wait until that happens. When things actually go well, then look back and you can reflect on what did you do well? What did you learn? All that good stuff. But on the front end, as depressing as it might sound, you have to look at the worst case scenario. Sometimes that annoys people. Welcome to business. People will always want to be buddy with you in real estate. Oh yeah, I've got your back. Oh, I would never ruin my reputation. I've got you, dude. And I'm the one that now has to ask the awkward questions of like, yeah, but what if things go wrong? What does that look like? And I need people. And I now only work with people who can respond like a freaking human when that question is answered, and not just, oh yeah, don't worry about it, bro. No, I am worried about it. I'm very worried about it. And we're going to talk about it. And if that's uncomfortable for you, then we're not going to work together, because I know what can happen and I know what it felt like on the other side of that. And I don't want that ever for me. And I don't want that ever for you. So if you are looking at people in the funding business, in the real estate space in general, this doesn't even have to do with funding. If you are looking with people in that space, there will be a lot of people who look like they're succeeding. I encourage you to find those people and then dig in with either them or other people they've worked with to figure out, how did they respond when things went poorly? What happened then? How did their business survive? Or is it surviving? Does it look nearly as good as it does on the outside? And if you can do that first, if you can focus on that first, then you can build a foundational business that will not put you in the crappy situation I put myself in when I was getting started. And you can just move forward and actually focus on the things that matter. So that's what I hope you can get out of this video. I made a lot of really big mistakes funding this stuff. I try to make these videos to speak to myself in the past so that you, who might be a few steps behind where I was on this funding, make money in real estate vibe, journey, whatever it is, you might be a few steps back there, but you can use that as your superpower if you pay attention to this stuff and put it to practice. Look at what you're doing right now. Whether you have a business up and running or not, just because you're making money does not mean you're on the right track. It has to be sustainable. It has to be able to survive downturns, right? What happens when the market crashes? What happens when things go poorly? What happens when a person that you trusted turns their back? It's business. It happens. And if you're not planning for it, it'll plan for you and it will ruin everything. I'm not here to be a doomsday person. I just want to share my story with you so that you can learn from the mistakes that I've made. So I hope that adds some clarity to where you're at right now. And even though I've cleaned up my EMD funding process now, it actually isn't a major part of my income anymore, because what I replaced it with has actually netted me 10 times more money with a lot less headaches along the way. And trust me, I've had the headaches. I have learned from those mistakes. If you want a full breakdown of my new approach, it doesn't have anything to do with funding EMD. It's a lot more niche. It's a lot more profitable. It's an incredible way to make money. You can click the video that's being recommended somewhere right here and check that strategy out.